Hello everybody, this is John Mark Johnson Jr. again, host of Reform GGA, and today we're going to be talking about cleaning double action, single action autoloaders. And to help us do that today, I have my Bursa TPR9 with the threaded barrel, and before we do anything else, we'll go ahead and we'll make sure that the gun is clear. I've explained this in previous videos, but the basic idea is that you move the magazine and then you move the slide. So we need to get the magazine out, remove the magazine, and you can see that I just have dummy rounds in there, and I always suggest that people buy dummy rounds so that they can practice unloading and reloading the gun, they can practice manipulating the gun, dry firing, all those kinds of things safely, both in terms of, not shooting something that they don't intend to shoot, but also safe for the gun itself in terms of not damaging the gun, because dry firing can do that if you don't have some kind of a snap cap or dummy round in there. All right, so move the magazine, and then we need to move the slide. And again, it was just a dummy round that was in there, but we'll put that off to the side. Lock it open, check and make sure that indeed the mag well is empty. You can feel that the mag well is empty. I can see that the chamber is empty. Give the gun a bit of a shake before I stick a finger in there. Yes, I can feel that the chamber is empty. So this gun is clear. Now, one of the first questions that we need to address is, when should you clean a gun? And the answer to that most people would advise, and I would agree with them, is that you should clean a gun when you first get one, and then every time that you go out shooting with it, when you bring it back, you should go ahead and clean it. So when you first get it, and after every trip to the range, basically. Now, there are a lot of people that do not clean them when they first get them, and that can cause problems. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Most of what it does is it just creates cleaning problems later on, because if you clean your gun when you first get it, you're going to wind up putting an layer of oil on it that will protect it. And so that when you take it out and you start shooting it and you get it dirty again, it's going to be a lot easier to remove that dirt because you have a layer of oil that is holding that dirt and grit and grime off of the gun to begin with. So if you clean your gun when you first get it, you're going to be making it easier on yourself later on down the line. Another reason to clean a gun when you first get it is that a lot of guns, not all of them, but a lot of guns will come with a packing grease on them. And the packing grease is not an actual lubricant, and not actually what the gun is designed to run with. Instead, it's basically a preservative that keeps the gun more or less in a stable state until it is sold. It is just for packaging and shipping purposes. One of the very common things that's done in this, especially if they think that the gun is going to be stored for a long time, is something like cosmoline. Cosmoline is not a good thing to run in the gun actively, but it is a great preservative. And so if you cake a gun in cosmoline, it's going to last a real long time, but you don't want to run it that way. It'll be really hard on the gun if you run it that way. It's just meant to preserve it. It's not meant as an actual lubricant. And so you should clean guns when you first get them, because sometimes they might have been packed in some kind of packing grease or cosmoline or something like that. And also as a preventative step for what's going to happen down the line. If you don't want to have to take a lot of time to clean your gun the next time that you go to the range with it, make sure you clean it real well when you first get it so that there's a good layer of protective oil on it that is going to make cleaning it easier next time. All right, now let's go ahead and set this aside and talk about some of the materials that we will need before we get started. First, you'll notice that I took a towel and laid it over my workspace. Depending on where you're working, that might not be an issue, but if you're someone who does it on the kitchen table and whatnot, your wife will probably not like it too much if you apply gun cleaning oils and solvents directly to her dining room table, just saying. So having something to catch all of the dirt and grime and oils and solvents and those kinds of things really is a good thing. All right, after that, as far as mechanical things to have with you that are good to have, one that I cannot recommend highly enough is a bore snake, and that is what you see here. It's basically a long, more or less round piece of cloth that has a couple of brushes embedded into it that tapers to basically a little string with a little metal end on it. That's how a lot of these bore snakes are made, and they're made in different calibers. This one is indeed made for 9mm. And of course you want to make sure that you get the appropriately sized one for your gun. And there are some of them that can handle different multiple calibers. For example, this one is technically a 9mm one, but there are some calibers out there that are actually the same diameter as 9mm, like 380 Auto, 38 Special, 357 Magnum, have all basically the same nominal diameter, and so the same bore snake can be used on all of them. But of course, that doesn't extend for every caliber that is out there. A 22 is obviously going to be much smaller than this, and it will need a smaller bore snake. But bore snake is definitely a good thing to have, and one of the greatest advantages of them, in addition to being very easy to use, which we'll show here in a little bit, they also help preserve the life of the barrel, and I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. Another item to have that is handy for cleaning purposes is some kind of a brush that has nylon bristles. Okay. If you cannot find a specific cleaning brush that has nylon bristles, and this is one that is actually made for gun cleaning, and that's why it's double-sided, a small end and a big end. But if you cannot find a purpose-made brush with nylon bristles, a regular toothbrush with nylon bristles will work as well. Not a good idea to use a toothbrush that has already been used for your teeth, because it'll come in contact with toothpaste, and toothpaste can be somewhat caustic and cause some gumming up problems and those kinds of things and leave weird residues. But some kind of a nylon brush is a good idea to have. And then I've personally found that ballpoint pens work pretty well for a lot of things, and then there's something that I have around. And at the end of the cleaning process, I want to show you guys how to make sure that your firing pin is operating correctly, which is always a good thing to have in any gun, but especially in a double action, single action autoloader. And there is a fairly easy way to test it using ballpoint pens that I want to show you guys, so I'll have those on hand. All right, so those are the main, forgot. Also, in terms of materials that you'll need, a couple of cloths is a good idea. One cloth for the actual cleaning of removing the carbon and buildup and whatnot. And I usually like to have it be something that's lighter in color and made of cotton, because cotton is absorbent, whereas polyester is not so absorbent. Cotton is also fairly pliable and not very abrasive, whereas polyester is somewhat abrasive and not as pliable. So something that's light colored and made of cotton to clean the gun with and wipe up the extra carbon and whatnot is a good thing. And then the other cloth that I have is basically just an oil cloth. It's something that I use to wipe down the gun when it's done and finished, and I want to make sure that it isn't slick to the touch and whatnot, and so I just wipe off the excess oil. This one, the oil cloth, I'll often wind up using through multiple cleanings because it doesn't really get dirty, and you're not going to be applying a ton of oil in the first place, so it's not like it gets too soupy either. And so you can reuse it a few times without any major problems. But yeah, so we've talked about the cloths that you'll need. We'll talk about some of the brushes and those kinds of things that you'll need. Now let's talk about some of the gun cleaning materials that you'll see at a lot of gun stores. Take a look at a few products here that are actually very good products. I'm not going to be using them today, and I'll talk about that as well, but we'll talk about what they do first. The first one here is Hop's number 9 gun bore cleaner, and I have used this on many, many occasions. As you can see, the bottle's pretty well worn, and it's good stuff. It does exactly what it's designed to do, and it cleans the bore. And if you're using it with a bore snake like I do, what I usually do is I take the front end of the bore snake, the side that has the brushes and the little string on it, take the front end, whoops, all thumbs today, but I'll take the front end and I'll actually dab it down inside of the Hop's number 9. Obviously, you'll want to make sure that it's a clean bore snake, and by the way, these bore snakes you can clean in a washing machine if you want to. Just put them inside of a knit bag or something like that, so that the little metal end on the string doesn't bounce around in there too much. But put it inside of a knit bag and you can clean these, and as long as it's clean, you can go ahead and directly dunk it down inside of the bore cleaner. And then on the end of the bore snake, you'll put a little bit of gun oil, and then as you pull the bore snake through the barrel, the front end of it with all of the bore cleaner on it, will clean out the barrel, and the brushes will loosen stuff up and whatnot. The rest of the material will pick up everything that the front end loosens up, and then the back end that you applied the oil to will then put some preservative inside of the bore to protect it from any future corrosion. And that's the way that it's designed to work, and that's the way that a lot of people use it. And when I use this system, that's what I do, and it works out wonderfully fine. So Hops number 9 bore cleaner is a solid bore cleaner that does exactly what it's supposed to. No complaints about performance whatsoever. This Lucas Extreme Duty Gun Oil does exactly what it's supposed to do. It is a good preservative, and it's also a very good lubricating oil. Lucas has a good reputation, especially from from the automotive industry, the oils that they use there. And they are very good lubricants. They're very good protectorants. They work very well for that. Another item that is worth mentioning and can be very helpful for some people is CLP. As it says right on the bottle, it cleans, lubricates, and protects. And it's an all-in-one formula. You basically just spray everything down with it, including the inside of the barrel and whatnot. Clean it as best you can. And then it just works as a general cure-all. And it also does a good job. My problem with all 3 of these products, though, even though each of them does exactly what they're supposed to do and they work very well, they're also rather expensive. It's not uncommon to pay $5 to $15 for any of the items that you see here. The Hops number 9 is usually on the less expensive end of the scale. The gun oil is usually somewhere medium, and then this CLP, especially because it has the spray nozzle on it and all those things, tends to be a little bit more expensive, usually in the $10 to $15 range, depending on how much you get. But all of these things that you get from common gun stores are going to be 50 cents to $1.50 per ounce, and I shoot a lot, and I also have a lot of guns, and it got to the point where just having this whole cleaning regimen with all of these materials that are rather expensive just got to be something I really wasn't interested in, and so I don't use these all the time. I do use these on specific guns that I want some of the added performance that they provide, and they do add performance versus other materials that I'm going to show you guys. But a lot of times I just can't justify the cost. And so while they're good, and I can vouch for them performing well, I just don't appreciate the cost. All right, so those are some materials that are not necessarily bad, but let's look at some of the materials that would be bad that I definitely don't recommend for cleaning. First one would be a traditional bore brush. Now, technically, this one isn't a bore brush. This is actually a chamber brush I use for a different gun. But a lot of people use these as bore brushes. It's a long metal rod. They'll put some kind of a brush on the end, and then they'll apply a cleaning solution to the barrel, stick the rod down in there, and basically yank it back and forth to clean the barrel. And that is going to actually be really, really, really hard on the barrel for a number of reasons. One is that some of these cleaning rods don't rotate with the rifling, and if you have something that doesn't rotate with the rifling, it'll be pulling against the rifling, and that's going to cause problems. Now, this particular one does actually rotate. I don't know if you can see that in there, but it actually does spin, so it does rotate with the rifling, and so that's a little better. But even at that, these ones will still wind up ruining the rifling, provided you use them often enough. There are a lot of people out there that don't shoot their guns very much at all, and so it's not really going to matter. But if you're like me and you shoot on a fairly regular basis, you can get to the point where you can start seeing wear and tear from these things. Like I said, this cleaning brush right here, this cleaning rod, is a very cheap one. It's made out of aluminum. And as you can see, that aluminum has a lot of striations in it, and that's because aluminum is a fairly weak metal. And each of those striations is a place where something can become embedded in that metal that would be rather tough and hard. And if you get this hard thing embedded into the metal and you start ramming it into your barrel, you can scratch up the inside of the barrel. And so that's definitely not a good thing. And then another issue is that even if you have a barrel that rotates, having this back and forth motion inside of the barrel is still going to cause problems. Okay. Now, the reason for that is that the edge of your rifling really, most of the time in a lot of guns, is actually an edge. And if you push on it on one direction, it's going to tend to get bent over in that direction. And then if you yank it back through, even if it's rotating with the rifling, it's still going to try to push it the other way. And so you're going to have this back and forth motion in there. Back and forth and back and forth, and it's going to keep bending over the edges inside of the barrel, and eventually something's just going to snap. And when the edge of your rifling snaps, you're going to lose your rifling real quick. It's basically going to get shot out within the next few trips to the range, depending on how many rounds that you put through it. But if you get the edge of your rifling, which is usually a nice, fairly crisp edge, bend it back and forth, it snaps, you're going to get this jagged edge. You're going to shoot, that jagged edge is going to get worn down, it's going to get worn smooth, and you don't have any rifling anymore. And there's a lot of people that has happened to. I have a friend who has an AR-15 that he has been complaining about it being not very accurate anymore. He used to say, I could hit, what was it? It wasn't a golf ball, not quite that good. But moderately accurate for an AR-15. It was like about a tennis ball size that he could hit from 100, even 200 yards pretty consistently and do pretty well with it. But recently it's just not been up to snuff. It hasn't been very good. And what happened is he shot out his barrel. And that is something that usually doesn't happen unless the edge of that rifling itself has been worn down to the point where it basically breaks off and you get weird jagged edges that are then smoothed out when you start shooting through it. And so, wear and tear on barrels because of cleaning rods like this definitely is a thing. It's not as common with pistols at all because pistols operate at much lower pressures. But these kinds of cleaning rods are not good on your guns. Like I said, some of them are fixed, they don't rotate at all, and those are really hard on the guns. But even if they do rotate, the cheap ones that are made of aluminum are not good because material become embedded in that aluminum and it'll scratch up the inside of the barrel. And then just the fact that a lot of people use them in such a way that they push and pull, push and pull, push and pull, push and pull, and they're going to be taking that edge of the rifling, pulling it one way, pulling it the other way, pulling it one way, pulling it the other way, and eventually something's going to snap. And so I do not recommend cleaning rods in general. This is about the only way that I'll actually use a cleaning rod, and that is as a chamber brush. In this case, it's only the brush end of it that's actually going into the gun, and the primary issue of it is this thicker part right here that actually cleans out the chamber. That's about the only thing that I use cleaning rods for anymore. Otherwise, it is the bore snake. Bore snakes are much nicer on the barrel because you only pull them through the barrel one way, so there's only one way motion. You don't have that back and forth snap problem. It's always one way through the gun, and much nicer to the barrel. Get a lot better barrel life when you do that. All right, so that's one thing that's in the not recommended list. And another thing I wouldn't say is completely non-recommended, but I would definitely say use sparingly, are the super duty ultra cleaners that are advertised to take care of copper. Okay, some copper in your barrel is actually not a bad thing, and actually it's a really good thing. When you first get your barrel from the factory, your barrel is going to have little micro striations in it. It's just a result of the manufacturing process. There's just going to be little striations inside of the barrel that are left over from the manufacturing process. And when you fire rounds through the barrel that are copper plated, which most center fire rounds are, especially plinking rounds, ball rounds, are going to have some kind of a copper jacket or copper plating on them. And little bits of that copper is going to wind up transferring to the barrel. And it's actually going to fill in most of those striations. And what will happen is your gun will actually get more accurate. It usually takes somewhere between 20 rounds and 100 rounds. And after that, your gun will actually start to shoot more accurately. And it's not because you're breaking in the barrel per se, or you're doing something that's treating the barrel. Some people think that they are, and they have this super special little method that they think just makes the barrel so much better and more accurate. That's not what's happening. What happening is you're shooting copper-plated or copper-jacketed bullets to the barrel, and that copper is being deposited into the striations in the barrel, and it's making the barrel more consistent and therefore more accurate. And because of that, you don't actually want to remove the copper. this stuff says it's going to remove copper. You don't want that. You want to have some copper in the barrel because it fills in all of those crevices and it smooths things out and it gives you a nice mirror-like polish inside the barrel. That's what you want. Now, does that mean that this kind of stuff doesn't have a use at all? No, it does. There are some times where you'll get crud and whatnot that builds up on the gun, on the metal parts of the gun, and you need a strong solvent to remove it. And a strong solvent like this can help that, and it can help with that. And I've used this solvent from time to time, but it's very, very, very rarely. In fact, I can count the number of times that I've used this solvent on over a dozen different guns on just one hand. And I don't use it very often. There are a few times where I'll get some buildup, like on a breech face, or sometimes even on the handle of a gun. There'll just be some weird organic buildup, and I need something fairly strong to remove it, and that's where I'll use this. But most of the time, especially on the barrel itself, you don't want to use something this strong. That copper that lines the barrel is helping you. It's increasing your accuracy, not decreasing it. Okay, and especially with pistols. Pistols do not build up enough copper to be an issue most of the time. Now, that can be different with rifles. With rifles, you can get the phenomenon of copper fouling, but that is usually with people who fire a lot of rounds in usually fairly quick succession that will get copper fouling. But if you're a little bit more patient with the gun, you don't do mag dumps, those kinds of things, even with a lot of rifles, you're not going to get enough copper fouling to worry about using this as an actual bore cleaner. So am I saying that you don't need it at all? No, I'm not saying don't have it around at all, but I'm saying use it very, 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 very sparingly. Because overuse of this will damage the barrel, because it's a very strong cleaner. If it's strong enough to take out copper, it's going to be strong enough to mess with most of the metals as well. And of course, your barrel is made of metal. And so you don't want to use something that is too strong. All right, so what is my solution? What do I use most of the time? Well, lately I've taken to go into the old standby that frankly a lot of gunsmiths use. And that is a combination of good old mineral oil and mineral spirits. Both of these I happen to get from Walmart before all the COVID-19 craziness. Although I would imagine that there's probably not too much of a run on mineral oil and mineral spirits in Walmart, just saying. But these are what I use to clean my guns now. The mineral spirits is something that works real well as a bore cleaner and a general metal cleaner. And the mineral oil stands in for the gun oil, basically. It works as a preservative and a lubricant. Now, are either of these as good as the dedicated super duper gun store cleaners? You know, mineral spirits and hops number 9. Are they the same? No. Mineral oil and Lucas gun oil, are they the same? No. You're not going to get quite the same performance out of them. But if you use your guns on a fairly regular basis, but you don't overuse them when you take them out, they will do just fine and be considerably less expensive. Okay. Both of these I was able to get for about 12.5 cents a round before taxes. That's pretty good. And so that is what I wind up using. Okay, 12.5 cents per ounce. That is more than dealable. I can definitely work with that. Now, I don't use them separately. I usually use them as an all-in-one. And that's what I have in this little squirt bottle here. And before use, shake it up to make sure that the two are mixed well. And as far as mixing it, I usually have about 2 parts mineral oil to every part mineral spirits. So more mineral oil than mineral spirits. Okay. The exact formula you can mess with on your own to figure out what works out best for you, but for me, that's what seems to work best, is about 2 parts mineral oil to 1 part mineral spirits. It's very cheap, it's very effective, and it works just fine. Alright, so that is all of the equipment that you'll need and the explanation for basically what they do and why. Let's go ahead and get into cleaning the gun. First thing that you want to do, like I mentioned at the beginning of this, is you want to make sure that the gun is clear. We already did that. After you make sure that the gun is clear, go ahead and take it apart. That is going to vary depending on the particular kind of gun that you have. And so you'll want to follow your instruction manual on that one. On this particular gun, because it has a threaded barrel, you want to take care of the threaded barrel part of it first. So just unscrew that. All right, set that aside. And then this one has a dedicated takedown lever so that I can pull the gun apart. And then I'll take out the guide rod and the spring. And this guide rod and spring assembly are such that they can come apart, but I'm not going to take it apart just because that's more pieces that I have to keep track of and whatnot. And I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to leave them together. It's easier to deal with that way. Then push the barrel forward, tilt it out. And those are all the basic parts. All right. Now let's go ahead and get to spraying things down. As far as this cleaning solution is concerned, that's made of the mineral oil and the mineral spirits, you can use it on most guns with a caveat. Mineral spirits can be very hard on some plastics, and so with certain guns you're going to want to be careful. Now, most guns nowadays, if they have plastic on them, it's usually some form of nylon, and mineral spirits won't harm nylon. It's safe, it's fine. But some cheaper guns will not be made of nylon, and some of the older guns won't be made of nylon. Even if they're polymer guns, sometimes they won't be made of a nylon mixture. A lot of times nowadays it's a mixture of nylon and glass that actually makes up the gun. But there are some cheap manufacturers that will sometimes include other plastic parts in their gun that are not the glass reinforced nylon. And so you'll want to be careful about that. And then sometimes you'll also get parts, even on metal guns. This one is an aluminum frame gun, but the handle is plastic. And this plastic handle doesn't necessarily feel like nylon. It feels more like something else. So I'm going to be careful about getting too much cleaner on that. Like I said, mineral spirits, safe on nylon, but other plastics, not so much. Right, so make sure I shake it up real nice and good, and I'm going to just squirt it onto the table here. And that's because when you let it set for a while, the mineral oil will go to the bottom, and the mineral spirits will float up to the top, because it's basically kind of the old oil and water thing, except in this case it's oil and mineral spirits thing. So you need to spray it a few times to make sure that you're actually getting the mixture into it instead of just the mineral oil. And then I'm going to use my hand to cover up the handle part of it so that I don't spray onto the handle. And then just spray the inside fairly well. Make sure that I spray along the rails so that that gets covered as well. And using my hand to make sure that it doesn't get onto the actual handle, because I don't know that the handle is actually nylon, so just kind of using my hand to stop it from getting into everything else. And those are the main parts that need to be cleaned in there, so I'm just going to set that aside. Before I get too far into here, I really should make sure that I spray the barrel, because that's the part that you want to have sit the longest, because it's usually the part that is most critical for cleaning. And you can see inside the barrel, it actually looks pretty clean already, and this is a gun that I haven't used recently. So everything that you're seeing in there is basically just lint from carrying it around, because this one I've had in my holster on my person, and you get some lint from that. But other than that, it's not actually very dirty in it. You can see it has a very mirror-like surface for most of it, very reflective, very shiny. So it's pretty good already, but pretending like this is a gun that you just fired, definitely want to get the oil in there, and we're going to let it set aside the longest, spray everything else down. And that we're just going to set aside over there, and we're just going to kind of let it do its thing. And we'll worry about most of the other parts for now. Now, and I've talked about this before, as far as oiling a gun and applying oil to a gun, there really isn't a such thing as over-oiling a gun, except when it comes to the firing pin channel. The firing pin channel on a double action, single action gun begins on the back. You can actually see that little round part in there is actually the back of the firing pin. And there's a channel inside the bottom part. You'll see the firing pin block. See if I can take one of the pins and show you guys this. So that I'm pressing on, that's the firing pin block, so that's part of the firing pin channel. And then in there you can see the little hole. And that little hole is the end of the firing pin. If you get a lot of oil in there, it will cause problems. For the most part, it's pretty much impossible to over oil a gun, except when it comes to that channel. So the best way that I found to do it is to take my finger and plug up the back end of it. And then I'm going to spray down so that I can't get anything actually back up and into the channel. So I cover the back end with my finger, and then I spray down so that I don't get anything back up into the channel. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side. Cover the back end, and then spray down. All right, and then go ahead and spray the recoil spring and guide rod assembly. And then the little thread protector that goes on the end of the barrel, because this is a thread version, go ahead and spray that down. We'll go ahead and start cleaning with this. So I've already sprayed it. Now I'm going to take the nylon brush and scrub it. Sorry for the camera shaking. The camera is attached to me, and so if I shake, it shakes, so I apologize for that. Okay. And this is where I really like having a brush with a little side so that I can get in there and I can actually scrub out the interior. Okay. All right, now that I've scrubbed everything out, now I need to remove as much dirt and grime as I can. So I'm going to use the cleaning cloth, and I usually prefer that my cleaning cloth be lighter in color so that I can actually see if I'm taking anything out. Like I said, this gun is fairly clean, and so I don't expect to take a whole lot out, just basically dust bunnies and whatnot from carrying it. But get as much out of there as I can. And get it fairly cleaned off and fairly dry. And technically there's still oil on there, but it's going to be a very thin layer now, and that's all that you really need to preserve the gun. It's just a thin layer of oil. Most of it will come off in the rag, and when I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and wipe things down with the oil rag. But that part, I've already scrubbed it, and I've already removed all the excess material that I can, so that is good to go. All right, on to the next piece. We'll do the recoil rod and recoil spring assembly. Guide rod and recoil spring assembly, I should say. Go ahead and, like I said, scrub away. And yeah, I do scrub it all together. And I do compress it just to make sure that I'm getting the parts that I don't normally get. And like I said, if you want to take it apart to clean it, that's just fine. Some of them don't take apart, and so you kind of have to do it like this. And I tend to like cleaning methods that are fairly consistent all around. Go through, loosen everything up. Then after you've loosened it all up, go ahead and wipe off everything that you can. This is not exactly going to be military standard, military specification here, where we get everything super duper clean. We're just going to make it sure that it's clean enough to actually function properly and be maintainable. All right. And everything looks good there. I can feel that everything still has a very light layer of oil on it, but nothing in excess. So that works. Go ahead and grab the slide here. And you'll notice that I'm still holding the slide so that it's facing down so that everything can run away from the channel and not into it. Go ahead and scrub the back end. You do want to scrub the back end, and it's okay that there's going to be a little bit of oil from the previous parts that you've cleaned there. Okay, you do want to put a little bit of oil on the back end of the slide. You just don't want to drench it with oil so that you don't get a lot of excess oil into that firing pin channel like we talked about. But start on the back end and just kind of keep working down. You'll have a lot of grooves in there, so make sure that those are all cleaned out. And then there's also the grip texturing cure, and that will often get a lot of buildup in there as well, so clean that out real well. Top of the gun usually doesn't have a whole lot of crud, but still need to clean it. Okay, so clean the upper part pretty well. Keep going down. And do go ahead and get the breech face. Like I said, you still want to have it pointed down so that the oil is not flowing back into the firing pin channel, but you do want to clean that breech face, because that is a part that the bullets are going to be sliding back and forth on, and so it does need to be clean and polished and all those kinds of things to function properly. So you do want to clean it, but just make sure that you keep everything pointing down. And this is a good opportunity to make sure that if you do have a loaded chamber indicator like this one does, to make sure that that loaded chamber indicator is working properly. So I'm just pulling up on it with my thumb here, and you can hopefully see that it's what it's doing. Just making sure that it works properly, that it has still good spring tension, etc., etc. Still holding it down. Get inside those rails. Make sure all that gets cleaned out. Just keep working my way down the slide, making sure that everything flows out of the channel and not into it. Okay, and don't forget about the outside as well. Usually not as big of a deal, but still something to get. Get some more texturing there for manipulating the slides, so make sure you get in there real good. And then the front end is usually going to have some holes and whatnot in it. And that's where having a small side to your brush can really come in handy, so that you can get inside those holes real well. And then finally, get the very front face. And then again, with the slide still facing down so that everything flows out of the firing pin channel instead of into it. Go ahead and wipe off all the debris that you have now loosened up. It's often helpful to take a small edge and run it into the smaller parts of the slide. And if the material is small enough to fit inside of the guide rails, that's really preferable, because the guide rails will definitely get some buildup in there, especially dust and lint and things like that. So if you have something that's small enough to fit into those rails, go ahead and use it. And as you can see, there's not much coming out of this at all. Like I said, this gun was already pretty clean. I haven't shot it since the last time I cleaned it, so all that it's been doing is just been in the holster when I've carried it. And it'll pick up dust and lint and stuff from that, but it's not going to pick up a whole lot. Then I'm going to make sure that I get that breech face real well, because it needs to be nice and smooth and all that. There'll still be a small layer of oil left on things, and that's just fine, because you want some there as a preservative, you want some there as a protectorant. You just don't want it to be, soupy and, have oil running all over your hands when you're done and whatnot. Alright. And make sure everything that I can there. Alright, and again, didn't really get a whole lot off. That is pretty much not any different from where it came in, from how it went in. There's a few little specks here and there of some dirt, but like I said, most of that is just lint from carrying the gun around. So if you cleaned your gun decently the last time and you haven't shot it since, yeah, you're not going to pick up much. It's just going to be dust bunnies and those kinds of things. Alright, so that is good. And then the main frame of the gun, and most of what we're worried about are the internals and also the hammer space. As far as how the hammer and how you deal with the hammer and how much it needs to be manipulated and cleaning is going to depend on the gun. On some guns, to disassemble them, you take the hammer to kind of like a half-cock position, and for cleaning, you'll basically just leave it there. And for the most part, that's what I recommend, is whatever position the hammer is in for cleaning, just go ahead and leave it in that position. And just kind of work around it. And the oil will seep where it needs to seep, and will lubricate what it needs to lubricate, and you just clean around it as best you can. Some manufacturers will recommend different things, but for the most part, you basically just work around it in whatever its disassembled state is. Okay, and then make sure that you get the rails real well. Like I said, sorry for the shaky camera. Whenever it's attached to me, so when I shake, it shakes. Make sure you get the rails. And the rest of the gun is, I'm not really going to worry about scrubbing all that much. It's basically just the insides, those surfaces that I already got that you need to clean. The rest of it is basically just wiping stuff out of it. So take your cleaning cloth and wipe out all the excess. Do be somewhat careful because some of the smaller insides can be just a little delicate, so don't be too forceful. But you still want to have enough pressure to actually make sure that you remove any grit that does become loosened. And there I picked up just a little bit of material, not much, but I picked up a little bit of material there. But you don't have to be super forceful at all. Then again, take an edge, put it inside the rail. And yeah, not much came out on that, but with the gun being fairly clean already, didn't expect a whole lot to come out. If I had just been to the range and fired this, there would have been more, but such as it is. Right. Clean the other part of the rail here, and this one has a bifurcated rail. There's rail on the front section, and there's rail on the back, and there's a little open area in between. So if you get one part, make sure that you don't forget the back part. Then I'm just going to go down and wipe down everything else. Make sure you get the trigger good, because you don't want an oily trigger for sure. That's not going to help. Slipping around on the gun definitely isn't going to be a good thing. And you notice I'm kind of avoiding the handle a little bit. Like I said, I'm not sure if that handle is nylon or not. So I'm just going to apply the rag enough to wipe up excess, but I'm not really going to spend a whole lot of time trying to rub that cleaning solution into it just because I don't want to damage anything. All right, and we are good to go there. All right, so that is all the main components except for the barrel. So let's go ahead and get to the barrel now. When it comes to the barrel, we've let this thing set for a while, and that is so that the mineral spirits could do what they do in helping us get that barrel clean as we can. But I usually recommend that you actually start by cleaning the outside of the barrel first and then work in. So go ahead and scrub the outside parts of the barrel really nicely. Make sure you get into all the crooks and crevices and all that kind of thing. And this double action, single action gun is a tilt barrel design, so when the barrel is sitting in the gun and the gun cycles, the barrel will actually come up a little bit and the slide will actually move across the top of the barrel. And so the top of the barrel actually does need to be lubricated a little bit, and you need to make pay special attention to it and cleaning it to make sure that it gets to a really nice, clean, smooth finish. It doesn't cause extra problems. And then because this is a threaded barrel version, that end is going to take a little bit of extra special attention. Then work to the chamber area here. It has a very nicely polished feed ramp. A lot of bursts actually do have pretty nicely polished feed ramps. Get that all worked up, cleaned. Get all the edges nice and clean. And the idea of cleaning the outside first is that as you're rubbing material around, you get some material back into the chamber and back into the barrel. And if you clean the barrel last, that's not a problem. But if you clean the barrel first and then you start cleaning the outside and stuff winds up falling back into the barrel, well, you just got dirty what you made clean, and that's not good. So you start on the outside and you work in. All right, so got all that cleaned off. Now I'll go ahead and wipe off all the material that I can as far as dirt and grime and all that is concerned. And at this point, my fingers have become covered in the oil, and so it's actually safe to touch the metal with my oily hands. Most of the time you wouldn't want to do bare metal, touch bare metal with your bare fingers, because your fingers will of course have little bits of sweat on them and salts, and that can be really corrosive on metal. But if you've already got a little bit of the gun cleaning solvent that I'm talking about here that has the mineral oil in it, it's not going to be an issue, and you don't need to worry about it in that case. And I have another video out there on cleaning a CZ75 compact in which I show a different method for cleaning where you have to be just a little bit more careful. But what I like about this one is that your hands are going to get some of the protectorant on them, and so if you want to bare hands handle stuff, it's not as big of a deal. All right, so the outside is nice and clean. That is all well and good. And again, my cleaning rag is not really picking up a whole lot because the gun was already clean, but such is life. Now it's time to clean the inside of the barrel. And so let's go ahead and prep our bore snake. We're using the all-in-one solution. It already has the mineral oil and the mineral spirits mixed in together. And so we're going to use this solution on both the front part of the bore snake and the rear part. Normally you would do your bore cleaner on the front and the oil on the back part, but this is a 2-in-1 cleaner, so it has both, so we're just going to put it on both. So you apply quite liberally to this front part here. And also make sure that we get a decent coating of oil on those brushes so that they are lubricated before going in and they don't scratch things up too much. They're not steel brushes or anything like that. They're either going to be a copper or a brass most of the time, a lot of times copper, and so that's not nearly as abrasive, but pre-lubing them is not a bad idea. And then to make sure that the barrel does get lubed, we're going to apply some of this mixture to the end of the bore snake as well, so that as it gets pulled out, it leaves behind a thin coat of oil inside of the barrel so that that is protected as well. Right now I'm making sure that I don't have any knots in the rope or anything. All right, and then we're going to make sure that when we pull the bore snake through the barrel, we're pulling it through in the same direction that the bullets go. And that's so that we don't get that weird twisting, folding thing that I was talking about earlier. Everything with your barrel should always flow in one direction and one direction only. So that is what we are going to do. So bullets go in the back, they go out the front. And we'll just pull it through. And be fairly slow, especially as those brushes are coming through. They're loosening stuff up. Okay, there's the first brush out, second brush. And now the in-between material is basically just going to be picking up whatever was loosened. So just keep pulling and pulling and pulling. Be fairly slow about it. If you pull too fast, you don't really get any effect at all, but be fairly slow and patient. Now the back end is coming that had the little bit of extra oil cleaner on it, and now everything is going to get re-lubed. Squeaky, squeaky, squeaky. Boop. Now, sometimes you can get away with just doing this just the one time, and as you can see by looking down the barrel there, everything is very nice and shiny. There's still a little bit of a liquid, of course, but everything is nice and shiny, has a very nice mirror polish in there. That's what you're looking for. You can see very clearly that it is a very clean barrel. That's what you're looking for. If you still see little bits of debris and whatnot, you can do this process again, just simply pulling the bore snake through it again. We'll just do that for demonstration purposes, but it's nothing special at all. You do exactly what you did the first time, pulling it through in the exact same direction. Okay, so staff it through, pull it through in the direction that the bullet would go. Don't be too fast. Okay. Be nice and slow and patient. Let the bristles do their job. Okay, bristles are out. Now let the cloth pick up any of the excess material, any of the dirt and grime. Be nice and slow, consistent. Getting to the end of it where you have that extra little bit of oil on the end to lubricate everything going out. Oop. All right. And like I said, it is a very, very, very clean barrel. You can see a little bit of oil and whatnot on the sides, but otherwise, very clean barrel. Exactly what you want to see. And that's another good reason to have a light color cloth on the table so that you can look down the barrel fairly easily and get a good idea of how clean it is or not. Also, taking the barrel and pointing it up towards a light and looking at the light can also be a good way to inspect the barrel. But some people mistakenly think that what you're looking for is, you know, a kind of like a clean patch when you have the rods. You want the bore snake to come out clean, and that's not what you're looking for. The bore snake is going to come out dirty because that's what its job is to pick up all the dirt. What you want to see is that what it did is it cleaned it. And so you look at the barrel, and you should see that nice, pretty, shiny barrel. And yes, there's some liquid droplets in there and whatnot, but that's not going to hurt anything. So that is exactly what it's supposed to do. That is good to go. All right, now we get to go ahead and reassemble everything. Before I reassemble everything, I'm going to use the cleaning rad to wipe myself up a little bit, because now I've got oil all over my hands. And the nice thing about this cleaning solution is that the mineral spirits, while they can be toxic, they will evaporate. And so that leaves behind the mineral oil, and mineral oil is pretty inert stuff. It's not bad at all. So just go through, wipe off any excess off of anything that you still see has quite a bit of oil on it. Most of it won't. And we can work about on reassembling now. Okay, so take the slide here, put the barrel back in, take our guide rod and recoil spring, put it back in. All right, and then there does need to be some lubrication applied. We've already applied this material as the solvent as a cleaner, but we are going to need it for a little bit of lubrication. What I find usually works best for me is just to apply a little bit to my hand and then rub it on the rails as necessary. And then this is capable of producing a little bit of droplets, so I can put that on just a drop on the rails both forward and aft. So 4 drops is all that it takes. Right. And then for lubrication purposes, do the same thing with the rails that are on the frame of the gun. A drop on the fronts, a drop on the rear. Like I said, it only needs to be a drop. All right, so I've put lubrication on the rails on the top. I've put lubrication on the rails on the bottom. Go ahead and slide it back on. Make sure it's held all the way back. Flip my lever back into place, and for different guns, you'll reassemble them differently. Then I'm going to open up the gun. Apply a little bit of oil to the barrel, because like I said, the slide will in fact make contact with the barrel, so I do need to have a little bit of oil up there. And then also this joint where the chamber and the slide meets is just a little bit of oil as well. Not a whole lot. All right. And now I can take my oil rag, now that everything is said and done, and clean it all off. Wipe off all the excess oil. I just want to leave behind a thin coating. Oops, I forgot one thing. My threaded barrel protector. How they go on is going to be a little bit different with different guns, but most of the time what you're looking for is the kind of beveled edge goes out, and then the one that has a little bit of a flare goes in usually. So go ahead and stick that on there. Tighten. You want to make sure it's good and tight. And a lot of times, even with shooting, it'll still loosen up. This one has an O-ring on it, so if I use just a little bit of pressure to torque it on there, it usually doesn't come off very easily at all. Go back to drying up the gun. Go ahead and decock it here. And just wipe everything down. Get oil out of all the places that it's not supposed to be. Especially around the trigger. You don't want an oily trigger. All right, cycle to action a few times. Get the lubricant worked around there as good as you can. Should be nice and smooth now. Very free movement, which it is. Okay, all that's good and pretty much good to go. The only thing you need to do now is just check and make sure that the firing pin is working like it's supposed to. So go ahead and open up the gun and make sure that you can find the firing pin block. Don't know how well you guys can see it in there, but I can see the little detent in there. And so I'm going to take a ballpoint pin and I'm going to press that in. So ballpoint in, pushing in on the firing pin block. I'm going to use another ballpoint pin on the back of the firing pin. And there we go. I can see that my firing pin actually is workable. And it is operational. There's been times where I've had a firing pin break on me and I didn't know it, and I carried the gun around with a broken firing pin. Didn't know it at all. It turns out the gun wouldn't have worked, but if I'd taken a couple of seconds with a couple of ballpoint pins just to make sure that the firing pin is coming through like it's supposed to, I would have been able to take care of that problem. But no, when I first got into guns, I was stupid and I didn't bother to check anything. But now, when I'm done cleaning a gun, this is one of the things that I do just to make sure that it's ready to go for next time. And also, if I haven't messed with the gun in a while, or I've done a lot of dry fire on it, I'll also do what I just did. Stick a pin into the firing pin block to hold it open. Take another pin, push it on the back of the firing pin, push it through, make sure that it actually protrudes like it's supposed to. And if it does that, it is good to go. All right, so that is how you clean a double action, single action autoloader. Thank you all very much for your time and attention. Bye-bye.